Hey everyone, Tom the Dilettante here, and welcome to another episode of Comments and Libations, where I take 10 minutes to review your comments while having a drink. Today's drink is going to be a red wine, a Pinot Noir. Now, I'm 45 years old, and I know jack and shit about how to pick a wine. But we were hosting some guests the other night, felt like being adults, and thought we'd pick up some wine. Going through the store, this name just stood out to me, and then the description on the back was quirky enough to make me want to buy it. I will be serving myself this fine wine in a crafted wine glass that my wife put together in one of them brush and bubble doohas. Being a fan of Doctor Who, this one is a TARDIS. We don't like to take life too seriously here in this household, so even when we are trying to be adults and have wine and stuff, we like to have a little bit of fun with it. Cheers. First one by Anthony DeVita. Hey Tom, does your Crosstrek give any errors from having something plugged into your OBD2? Yes, it does. So he's referring to a mod video I did after 1 year of ownership, and particularly to my scan gauge that I plug in to monitor the car. And so often I get this stupid error that pops up on my head unit that tells me I've gotten an important message about the vehicle's health. And then it asks me if I want to read it, and if I click I do, it's going to say, psych, you're driving so you can't read it. Tell me later, I don't know what it does. Anyway, this is often accompanied by an email that I keep getting into my freaking mailbox saying that your Starlink emergency services may not be working right. And if you take a look down below, you'll see in the fine print here that it says, please note, third-party devices such as some driver monitoring or third-party OBD2 port devices may interfere with the proper function of certain vehicle features, including the Subaru Starlink system. So, am I ready to give up my scan gauge? No. Am I just going to suffer through the existence of these kind of error messages? Yes. Unfortunately, Subaru just can't figure out what to do with that one, but I'll have to live with it. Next comment by Sui Generis. Excellent information and thanks for the update. Next question, why don't you use your voice on radio or podcast? Your voice is golden and would be perfect. Well, thank you, Sui. That's very kind of you to say. I've actually been told I've got a radio sounding voice in the past. This would actually be a pretty cool gig, I won't lie. I have zero idea on how to break into that industry though. I used to, in the Marine Corps, when I was like a PFC or a Lance Corporal, I remember getting teased by a couple of sergeants. They'd call me over and they just have me randomly do like a weather report for Okinawa in my radio voice until I got it entertaining enough where they were satisfied and then let me go. Alright, moving on, we've got Nicole C. Why wouldn't you just get square switches and put them in the cutouts? Just wondering. Good job, does look good. So this was in reference to the home-built relay panel and the little circular switches that I put next to the fuse panel inside. You know, I did want to use those cutouts, those blanks, originally, but when I pulled some of them out, they're actually pretty narrow. And there is one or two companies that 3D prints some inserts that you can put a switch into that are really sharp looking, but I just didn't want to spend the money to do that many switches across the board. So I just decided to go with these simple Amazon switches, which have worked very well for me ever since. Alright, moving on from It Music on my video on putting in some rear seat aux power. Why not just pop that back panel of the center console off? I did that to install mine, way easier than having to get the whole thing apart. Son of a bitch. The reason I didn't do that It Music is because I didn't know it did that. And now I do. And so do you. So if you're gonna do that mod, maybe you ought to just save yourself some time and take that back panel off and try to fish wires through that center console instead of disassembling the entire center console like I did. Nonetheless, I have zero regrets because I enjoy still learning things by taking them apart. And so now I know how to take it apart. And so do you. Good to go. Next, by David Balonas. Can you tell me where I can buy and description of the wire you are running across the car? This was actually my first video when I did a 12-volt panel install in the back. So there's not really a particular brand of wire or anything like that that you need to worry about buying. What I focus on is the application of what I'm using the wire for. You can search the internet and come across a whole bunch of charts like this one here. For, in this case, it's just DC power. It tells you what gauge wire to use depending on how long your run is and how much current you're going to be drawing. And how much current you're going to be drawing depends on the accessory or device that you're going to be running the power to. In my case, I was running no more than 7 to 10 feet, and since I was tapping into the equivalent of a cigarette lighter port, which typically only gives you 10 amps at most, I chose 14 gauge wire. Now, the brand of wire, whether you go stranded or solid core, I suppose is up to you. I prefer stranded because it's a little bit easier to fish. And yeah, that's basically it. So, not going to recommend a particular wire or gauge because I don't know your application. Just know that before choosing a wire, know in advance how you want to use your power so that you can choose the right wire accordingly. And again, you can find a chart like this all over the internet. I can't remember where I got this one from, but they're an excellent reference to have. Next one from Eric Chen. Can I get power from the Hatchlite of the driver's side? It's 12 volt and parallel the wire out for power. So similar to the last comment, I would say no, because if I'm not mistaken, the wiring to the Hatchlite and a lot of the little lights in the back are probably like 20 gauge wires, if not thinner. And so if you plan on using anything powerful on that accessory port, like a fridge or something, it's going to draw way too much power for a wire of that gauge. So see the answer to the last comment, choose a wire gauge appropriate to your application and you should be good to go. Tapping into the Hatchlite I would not recommend simply because of its very thin gauge wire. Next comment from Ethan Wrinkle on the coolest radio you've probably never heard of. How much could one person have so much to effing say? You gotta have a dozen radios. Well, first, that's terrible grammar, and I actually have more than 24 radios. It's not a matter of how much you have to say, this is just a matter of me trying to learn the hobby and learn about the different types of radio hardware out there. Heck, I've got probably 6 or 7 GMRS radios alone, and that's not only just for different applications such as your Midland type that are very channel based, the Radiodity GM30, which is a little bit more feature rich, the Baofeng UV9G. So I'll have multiples of those because when I go out, not all the people I ride with have radios, and so I can hand them out to my friends and people that I travel with. So therein lies a great reason to have multiple radios. As far as ham radios, well, I've got a number of handheld transceivers, or HTs as the ham community likes to call them, and mobile units and base stations. The mobile units, I've got one for each vehicle. And then the handhelds, you got different brands. I'm a big fan of Yaesu because I like C4FM, I like System Fusion, I like Wires X. These are digital modes that you cannot get on things like a Baofeng. Baofengs, just because they're rather ubiquitous. People have asked me questions about Baofengs, so I thought it would behoove me to own one or two just to play around with. Then there's other digital modes. So I've got an Anytone one and another Radiodity one that works on DMR, which is another type of digital radio. And this is just for me to learn how to use it, learn little idiosyncrasies of each type of service, each type of digital mode, and so on. And then there's high frequency, there's HF, the kind of signals that you can bounce off the ionosphere and talk around the planet, which is super cool. Next, by Jaime Benavides Jr. Can you please comment on how well the fridge fits in the official slide? The fridge is listed at 16.7 inches wide, and the sliding tray portion of the fridge sits in is listed at 15.7 inches wide. How can the fridge fit in the slider tray? That's a good question because based off of those dimensions, it absolutely would not fit. But looking at their site, I believe you may be looking at the AJ series fridge slider, which is rated at 15.9 inches wide. And that would certainly not be large enough to accommodate the Set Power RV45D fridge that I got. If you do look on their site though, you'll find a fridge slider for the RV and RV Pro series that is actually 17.6 inches wide. This is what I have along with that RV45D. It's bolted in the back of my GX and it's working fantastic. Next, by Zach Walsh on the Chinese diesel heater. How waterproof is the heater? Would hate to have it sitting in the rain and everything short out. It is not waterproof at all. I mean, consider you're paying a little over $100 for this thing, and if you were to leave this out in the rain or moisture, it's probably gonna shit the bed. So, my advice to you and what I do is to cover it somehow. If you're on site, you can either put it under a picnic table. You can even put it up underneath your vehicle if it's large enough. Or now that I use it in my shop, I've just mounted it inside the shop and funneled the exhaust outside. So it's been working quite well for me. Bottom line, don't presume to think that this heater is waterproof because the moment you get it wet, it'll probably die. Moving on from the Crosstrek mods after 1 year. T-Bone, I just like to drive my car stock. Okay, good to go. Next, from M. Jenkins, also on the Overland pack list. Got the Blackbeard fire starters and the arc lighters to go with it. Ah, cool. So, if you don't have the time to go caveman, then the arc lighter is windproof and lights the fire starters quickly. You know, actually, after I saw your comment, I thought, what a great idea. So I actually did get one of those arc lighters. Amazon special, this little orange bad boy that's waterproof, waterproof casing, an Explorer, and like you said, little plasma-based USB charged fire starter. This is now in my kit as well. I still have the caveman equipment because you never know. Sometimes it's just fun, sometimes it might be necessary. But this, badass. Moving on, Eugene Gooding. I just completed my GMRS application and payment. Does the FCC mail the license? No, they do not. This is an electronic service only, so you will need to go to the FCC Universal Licensing System. I covered it on this video actually. When you're applying for it, you have to go back there, and when you look under My Licenses, it'll list out your license when you receive it. I believe you have to enter an email address, and so you should get an email notification saying that when your license is approved, and I believe it even conveys your GMRS call sign at that time too. So if you haven't heard back from them via email, check your junk or your spam box in case it went there. And you can also just check that ULS, the Universal Licensing System, to see the status of your application, and if it's already been approved, that is where you're going to get your call sign. That's not just GMRS, that's also for amateur radio as well. Next by Peter McDougall. It's weird. Does he remind you of William Shatner, Star Trek, or is it just me? Interesting. Haven't got that one before. I'll let you all be the judge. Alright, that's 10 minutes for this month. I will see you next month for another episode of Comments and Libations. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you like this and other content on my channel, please hit like, please hit that subscribe, and even hit that notification bell so you can know when I put out more content. Thank you as always for joining me, and until the next time, this is Tom the Dilettante saying have a good one. Take care.